if I were to go back from Dublin's to performing with a young Dave Chappelle, 1993, I'm in New York City.
Shout out to Dave Chappelle, put his Instagram up here.
Dave Chappelle, of course.
1993?
93, yeah, 93,
Where's
94.
This, New York or
New York
DC?
City, yeah. And we were doing some college gigs together. And there was always a bunch of us that were like doing these like SUNY schools and up and down through New York City and New England. And Dave had been, if you know anything about Dave, he was learning from Charlie, who was teaching him comedy in the park. And there was this whole like, incredible...
Charlie Murphy?
No, Charlie...
Chaplin?
Barnett. Charlie Chaplin was teaching Dave Chappelle stand-up comedy.
Cut to a clip. Here's where if I knew Chappelle, I'd be like, just put the mustache on. I need 5 seconds. But who are you saying, Charlie who? Because I don't know who this is.
You know what? Charlie Barnett.
I don't know who Charlie Barnett is.
Don't use any of this. It's honestly, it's too much of a rabbit hole to get into.
It's fine. But continue.
Let me bring it right back to the service.
I'm not editing this out.
Doing gigs early with Dave Chappelle and some of the performers that were in and around New York at the time, I think that there was a understanding that we were the next group of stand-up comics coming up, and we were looking for ways to break the 1980s formulaic comedy, which felt a little bit more rigid.
By rigid, you mean bit
for television. Yeah. Everything was like, set a punch, set a punch, set a punch. And I was seeing some storytellers and somebody like Dave. We were already learning from each other, whether we were understanding that or not, that we would do gigs and then kind of break things down after the show at the table and try to figure out like, how can I be more myself and find my audience based on the material I love, but letting them know the person who also came up with that material. That was always missing from stand-up.
What do you mean?
Stand-up used to be, except for the person on panel, when you saw them after they do their jokes on a late night show, then what would they do, Rick? They'd sit and they do more jokes, right? It was kind of like, hey, this is where I banter with Johnny, but it's a few more bits that we set up. I think we understood there was more to stand-up than just the on-stage performer. And if you could fuse the real opinionated person and funny off the cuff or whatever that might be, coupled with the formulaic on-stage persona, that might be a more interesting place to live.
Who was your group? Like Chappelle, Patrice O'Neal, maybe?
Chappelle was New York. Before it was Patrice O'Neal, Bill Burr, Gary Gulman.
Gary Gulman is so funny, man.
I mean, everybody in that group from there that then hopped to New York City, we were just workers. We were doing it not just because.
But who broke through from your group?
Well, I was the first one to go to New York and then to be in LA, and I think I was the first one to get on television with a show I did with Betty White.
Do you attribute that to going to LA? If other people went to LA sooner, that could have happened?
I think that based on my gigs at colleges and understanding the rapport that I had with my age, my people that I would walk down a hallway in a college to do a show, and a teacher might say, hey, the show's over there. And I'd be like, I am the show. Like I was hanging out with my group.
Bad Judge Dredd impression. Is that what he said? Is that joke translate? He goes, I am the law.
Okay, so it's...
We'll put it in the clip. Sorry for the momentum cut, but this is the game, man. This is why it's so raw.
The point is, all those early years, I was surrounded by comics that were trying to break out of just simply formulaic. Patrice O'Neal is the perfect example of somebody who would go up on stage. He knew he could do funny stuff, but he chose to sometimes sit in a thought.
That's where my tell me this was going from. What is your mentality? Because we talked about on the phone the other day, because we had a couple of these scheduled. We had to reschedule.
Right. Due to rain at one point.
Right. And you walked out and it was raining. And it was my first time doing an indoor one. So I hadn't figured out the setup yet. So all morning I'm bringing stuff from outside. I'm setting up. Right. And it was raining and you canceled last minute.
Right. And I told you why.
Yeah, because it made you anxious.
Why did it make me anxious?
Your shoes, your hair, bringing stuff.
No. Because I told you, we experienced incredibly traumatic moments growing up with flooding in my home. And I get very unsettled with monsoon level rain. It wasn't just a light sprinkle that day. It was a real heavy rain that came through.
It was a heavy rain.
And I called you up, and I think that you thought that I was giving you a line.
No, I believed
but truly,
you.
I wanted to be able to come in here and be present with you, and I didn't want to be worrying that my house was flooding, even though, by the way, I live on a hill. It's impossible that my house could flood.
I know.
But I still think there's a way it could, and so I appreciate that we waited.
I bring that up because a couple of things, full transparency, and I think I even told you this on the phone,
Right.
was happening. Hey, man, I just rearranged my apartment.
Yes.
And a half hour before you're supposed to be here, you cancel.
Right.
And you said to me, you know, if you really want me to come, if you're going to be upset. And I said, listen, if you can't, you can't. But yeah,
Right.
But then I still recognize then, and even more so after some other conversations we had about some stuff, that I really could appreciate, which is, you know, maybe you don't like this about yourself. Maybe you're trying to fix it. Maybe you can't. But you know, I'm not going to shine in this environment for whatever reason, however silly it may seem to other people. You know that about you. So you're able to say, I can't do this.
Right.
I very much could connect to that. And when I realized that, it did make it go from, which I said to you, I said, come on, man, that's ridiculous, to like, you know, I have my things.
Right.
And what the character trait that relates to in me, outside of when to podcast or not, is sometimes something happens externally,
Right.
where you just, like what I was anticipating maybe was happening when you were looking around the room.
Right.
Listen, I can't thrive here. That happens in life. We could maybe get into that, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
I'm trying to follow you because we went from talking about early New York, and now I think
It's all connected.
Okay.
It's all connected.
I'm with you.
What I'm getting at is Dane Cook, you know, very accomplished. Okay, figured out how to do stand up, and there's
He's afraid of rain.
no. What I'm getting at is, you know how to do this thing, right?
Sure.
But there are still obstacles that you might have that other people have aren't even an obstacle if it happens to them.
Okay.
You're distracted. You get distracted. I'm trying to connect with you, and I'm sorry if I'm really leaning into this, but
I like it. You should lean into this. This is interesting stuff.
I will also relate to this where I get very distracted. Something will happen. I don't know, for example, I keep checking if the red light is still going on this camera, right? Because sometimes they turn off.
Right.
If I don't check that light, I'm not here with you.
Okay.
The moment I realize, so I know I'm
Right.
going to have to keep checking it.
And on the next podcast, we'll talk about that a lot more.
What do you mean?
The light situation.
Absolutely. Okay. Something has to happen for me to be able to be present.
I get it.
And if I'm not present, so my question to you is, for someone who is like that with some things,
Yeah.
what happens when you're on stage? Because when I'm on stage and that happens, I don't know how to, because you can't control everything. You can't control
Right.
the rain. You
And
can't
that-
control.
Right. Well, okay, now we're talking about two completely different things because, boy, this is tricky because it's an entirely different, I am conditioned for 30 years very differently of how I approach the stage and what I know I need before I take the stage and what I need to be doing on stage versus if a monsoon level rain comes in.
Well, let me acknowledge this. Let me take it for 1 second, just in
Yeah.
case this came across poorly.
It doesn't come across poorly. It's just hard to fuse these two.
Okay, then I'm not doing
Approaches.
my job right. First, let me acknowledge this. The rain thing, I mean this in a very honest, healthy, good way.
Yes.
I hope you don't feel I was calling you out for anything.
I did feel like you were calling me out.
Well, then
Only because I wasn't ready for that segue because we were talking about, I was vicariously enjoying talking about early years, and then it kind of whip snapped to why did you fuck me and not show up for my last podcast?
That's not
because
that's not what I
rained.
meant.
And I didn't mean that to be hostile back. I'm saying that's what it felt like in that moment where you suddenly
I noticed that energy shift. That's on me.
right.
I didn't bring it up for that.
Okay.
I didn't think I would even bring it up. I don't remember what got us there, but something made me think of.
I'm still the foundation for me of where you are. The foundation is formulaic and being present on stage. And somehow that went back to 93. It went to Dublin's to 93. And then we've whipped all the way around to a very rainy day. And I canceled last minute on you. Are you still upset about that?
0%.
Okay.
It makes
Clangs and chimes.
It makes me feel closer to you. I mean, I'm bringing this up not in a calling you out way.
I know you're not calling me out. Let's really, here's how I know. First of all, I love you. I respect you. And we have an amazing friendship for a lot of years. I know that you know I could have just said nothing that day. I could have said something's come up. I can't do it. A family issue or some bullshit, but I actually said, can I talk to you for a little bit? And I walked you through some trauma that I had in my life and why something that seems superfluous, like it's really raining heavy, to you've been setting up, and then to me apologizing several times to be like, dude, I really feel bad. Then a follow-up text to be like, I truly feel bad.
That's what I was saying. When you told me that, at first, we were very honest with each other.
Right.
And I told you, that's
probably
fucking
too
sucks.
honest with each other.
No, it's great because it made me feel closer to you.
You're right.
As it went on, it's like, a very small example is sometimes people will ask me about coming on the podcast.
Right.
And I don't want to have them on the podcast. And it's an uncomfortable position, but I tell them that.
How many people after you had Mark Maron on suddenly were like, hey, if you ever want me to swing by and hang with you? Like,
oh, is that the turning point?
Do you think?
No.
I think that a lot of people after that were like, oh shit.
Maybe. I guess I didn't clock it.
I feel like as a fan and on the exterior, when I was just watching, and I've been watching your podcast for some time, I felt like I remember saying that day, I guarantee legitimacy is in other people's minds.
Why? Because having him?
Yeah, because you had a fucking unbelievable, right. And not only that, but it was great. It was all the things that I hope we, chip off in this, which is like, it was compelling, it was funny, it was silly, it was the sniffing. Should we take a break? Because you know what, I'm starting to get a little.
It might be when I'm feeling like a connection with somebody. It happens a lot if I'm giving a compliment.
Okay.
My eyes water, or I don't
Right.
know if I feel emotional. It's just there's something that happens.
I know that thing too. That happens to me too. But the point is, we don't need to go down that road because we're not trying to make people. We've got so many doors that we've cracked open. Do you want to bring it back or should I?
Let me take it. When you're doing jokes and then also being present,
yes.
That's what I'm connecting to, this
Yes.
thing about, well, the rain is not going to allow me to be present.
Okay.
Listen, man, shit happens, and I love that you told me the truth. People make excuses. I don't like it. I know what it is, and then it's easier to digest. Right? Also, it's easier to calibrate with that person because then next time it's raining, it's like, I'll call you and say, let's reschedule.
And I hate to feel the need to counterpoint. Forgive the almost pun. You're watering down what I was actually experiencing that day, which wasn't just the rain has caused me to. It was a deeper thing that it brought up in me. And unfortunately, it was because it happened last second and I was ready to go out the door. And then suddenly I felt disconnected inside my own body. And I was like, I'm going to be not good for Rick today. I know that he wants to, we want to get a good flow going. And I don't want to be worrying about my house unnecessarily.
So what happens when you're on stage?
Okay.
And not rain, something, anything.
My dad died the day I went up at the Laugh Factory. I was with my dad the night before. I said, Dad, I have a contractual obligation to go back and finish this film. I was doing Good Luck Chuck. And they gave me a couple days to go see my dad because he was not doing well. So I was appreciative to the production. I went home, had an amazing, beautiful 48 hours with my dad. Now I'm going to. But he, more than anybody, loved business, and he loved when you kept your commitments. So I said, I got to keep a commitment. I got to go home, and then I'm going to come back after I shoot this one pickup or whatever they need me to do.
You're saying from
to
East
LA.
Coast to West Coast.
Boston to LA, and then I'd go
Boston.
back to Boston, to see my dad. He died when I came back. I went immediately to the Laugh Factory an hour later, and I think I said to Jamie Masada, the owner of the Laugh Factory, my dad just died. So maybe within like a few hours of learning my dad died, I entertained people. I had the love of the game as I did weeks prior and weeks after. Regardless of what's happening in my life, when I take a stage, 300 people, 30,000 people, something just is there for me that I've already, in my professionalism, prepared to walk into. Okay?
Could you explain that you've prepared
Just
to walk into?
years of conditioning, years of years of knowing the mechanics of stand-up comedy for me. The musicality, the verbiage, the embracing the movement and letting go of formulaic, listen to the crowd, make it a conversation. If some glass breaks, be in the moment. All that stuff is kind of waiting for me there because I'm prepared for all of that. Because I've had every kind of scenario from Pirates Den gigs to Carnegie Hall, beautiful straight through. The point being, I went up that night, I had a set, I got laughs. Nothing impeded on that. And at the end, I said, my dad passed away today. And I think they laughed at first because they thought it was a bit, and then I acknowledged my dad.
You didn't acknowledge it at all in the set?
Near the end.
Right.
12, 14 minutes just to
Into
feel
20?
Of a 20-minute set. Yeah, whatever. And then I acknowledged it. And then I said some beautiful words about my dad. And I was as real in that as I was in trying to find comedy in the comedic moments. Being present has always been the goal. When I landed on stage the first time at Catch a Rising Star in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I had everything to learn, but one thing was already there. I love when I get on stage, movement. And I wasn't like...
Because you're there. Because I'm here.
Right. So the one thing that with the thread that I had at the very, 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 very start was, oh wow, I'm a natural. I hate saying this. I'm a natural at movement. I'm a natural at making an audience feel like I've done this before, even though it was those early gigs. I had everything to learn.
Scoot doo, blabbity blue, scoop